The rain on 4th Street didn't wash away the city's grime. It just made it slicker, turning the asphalt into a black mirror that reflected the flickering neon sign of Mick's Diner. It was a cold, relentless November rain, the kind that soaked through cheap shoe soles and settled into the bones. Inside, the diner was a capsule of yellow light and the smell of stale coffee, burnt grease, and damp wool. Jace Miller leaned against the Formica counter, his eyes stinging from a double shift. He stared at the crumpled receipt in his hand, his mind running a frantic, looping algorithm. Tuition due, $3,400. Rent, $800, overdue by 4 days. Utilities, $120. Bank account balance, $42.18. He was 21 years old, a junior in structural engineering at NYU, and he was drowning. It wasn't a fast, dramatic drowning. It was a slow, silent descent into the crushing depths of poverty. He calculated that if he skipped lunch for the next month and walked the 5 miles to campus instead of taking the subway, he might save enough to keep his phone on. Maybe. Hey, Space Cadet, are you deaf? The harsh voice snapped Jace out of his spiral. He looked up at Booth 4. A trucker with grease under his fingernails and a cruel, bored smirk was waving his empty mug like a weapon. Coming right away, sir, Jace said. His voice was practiced, neutral, stripped of any pride. He forced his tired legs to move, grabbing the coffee pot. He walked over and poured the steaming liquid. The trucker didn't move his arm, forcing Jace to pour at an awkward angle. A few drops splashed onto the table. Watch it, the man sneered. You college kids are all the same, useless with your hands. Sorry, Jace murmured. He took it. He always took it. He was invisible, a ghost in a white apron, worth less than the vinyl seats he wiped down every hour. He was a variable in an equation that equated to 0. There was only one other person in the diner. She sat in the corner booth, the one furthest from the door, the tactical seat, as Jace had jokingly called it in his head. She was there every Tuesday and Thursday. Dark hair that fell over her face, an expensive wool coat that looked out of place in this dive, and a charcoal sketchbook always open before her. Jace knew her name was Elena because he had seen it on her credit card once. Elena Corves. But he knew nothing else. She rarely spoke, never smiled, and sat with her back to the wall, her dark eyes flicking to the entrance every time the bell chimed. Jace approached her table with the pot. The smell of the trucker's cheap cigarettes faded, replaced by her scent. Something subtle, like rain and vanilla. Warm up? Jace asked softly. Elena looked up. She didn't smile, but her eyes weren't unkind. They were just alert, always scanning. Please, and thank you, Jace. She was the only person in the city who used his name. It made the knot of anxiety in his chest loosen, just a fraction. Working late again? Jace asked, nodding at her sketchbook. It wasn't a drawing of a person or a landscape. It looked like a schematic of the street outside, jagged lines marking sight lines, traffic flow, and exits. Just studying, she said, closing the book. Like you. She pointed to the heavy engineering textbook sticking out of his apron pocket. Structural dynamics? Yeah, Jace sighed, rubbing the back of his neck, trying to figure out how much weight a load-bearing beam can take before it snaps. Elena looked at him, her gaze lingering on the dark circles under his eyes and the frayed cuffs of his shirt. Her expression shifted, a crack in the armor. Everything has a breaking point, Jace. Even people. You look like you're carrying a heavy load. Jace forced a laugh. It sounded brittle. I think I found my breaking point about 3 bills ago. I'm just holding on by friction now. He turned to walk back to the counter. The bell above the door didn't ring. Jace stopped. The street outside had gone unnaturally quiet. The rhythmic swoosh of passing taxis on the wet pavement had vanished. The honking of distant horns had cut out. Jace looked out the plate glass window. A black Chevy Impala was rolling down the street. It moved with a predatory slowness, ignoring the green light at the intersection. The windows were tinted so dark they looked like voids, absorbing the neon light of the diner sign. It drifted closer to the curb, slowing to a crawl directly in front of the glass facade. Jace's engineering brain, trained to analyze vectors and forces, calculated the trajectory instantly. The car wasn't parking. It was aligning. The angle was perfect for a sweep of the diner's interior. The rear window of the Impala rolled down. It wasn't a hand that emerged. It was the perforated barrel of a submachine gun, black steel gleaming wetly under the red neon open sign. Time didn't stop. It shattered into high-definition fragments. Jace didn't think about his tuition. He didn't think about his rent. He didn't think about the trucker in booth 4, or the fact that he was just a waiter who was supposed to be invisible. He looked at Elena. She was putting a packet of sugar into her coffee, her head down, completely exposed. She is in the kill box. "Get down!" Jace roared. The sound tore at his throat, primal and desperate. He didn't run away. He didn't drop behind the counter. He vaulted it. It was a move of pure desperation, his sneakers scrambling on the greasy linoleum as he launched himself into the air like a projectile. Crack thoom. The sound was deafening, a jackhammer assaulting the senses. The plate glass window disintegrated into a storm of diamonds and razor-sharp shards. Jace hit Elena mid-air, tackling her sideways off the bench. He drove her into the vinyl seat, curling his body over hers, making himself a human shield, pressing her face into the cushion, weaving his fingers into her hair to protect her head. Thud. 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 Bullets chewed through the wood of the booth. The ketchup bottle on the table exploded, spraying red vinegar and glass over them. Stuffing from the upholstery erupted like snow. The air turned into a choke cloud of pulverized drywall and gunpowder. Then, the impact. It felt like being hit by a sledgehammer swung by a giant. A searing, white-hot poker drove itself through Jace's upper left back. The force punched the air out of his lungs. He gasped, tasting copper and dust. The world spun violently. The car tires screeched. The engine roared, a V8 screaming as it faded into the rainy night. Silence returned, heavy, ringing, and broken only by the sound of falling glass. Jace lay on top of her, his vision swimming with black spots. He couldn't feel his left arm. The pain hadn't fully registered yet, just a cold, creeping numbness. Stay down, Jace wheezed, blood bubbling past his lips. They might reload. Elena wiggled beneath him. She shoved him gently, carefully, to the side so she could sit up. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't crying. Jace blinked, fighting the darkness. He expected to see a terrified college student. Instead, he saw a soldier. Elena pulled a phone from her pocket. Her hand was steady. Her eyes were cold, hard flint. She pressed a single button. "Dad," she said. The voice was commanding, icy. "Sector 4. The Vipers made a pass. They missed me. But a civilian took the round. He shielded me." She looked down at Jace, seeing the blood soaking his white uniform shirt, staining the floor tiles crimson. "Yes," she said into the phone, her voice cracking slightly for the first time. "Bring the charter. Bring the medics. And Dad, bring the war." Jace's head hit the linoleum floor. The last thing he saw before the blackness took him was Elena's hand resting on his forehead, and the realization that he hadn't just saved a girl. He had saved something much more dangerous. Consciousness returned in jagged fragments, fighting through a fog of morphine. First, the smell, not the sterile chemical smell of a public ER. This smelled of expensive lilies, antiseptic, and leather. Old, worn leather and stale tobacco. Then, the sound. The rhythmic beep, beep, beep of a heart monitor. But underneath that, no hospital chatter. No nurses laughing in the hallway. No announcements over the PA system. Just a heavy, oppressive silence. Jace opened his eyes. The ceiling was white. He was in a hospital bed, but the room was wrong. It was huge. A private suite with a view of the Manhattan skyline. He tried to shift, and a bolt of lightning shot through his shoulder blade, making him gasp. Easy, kid. You're stitched up tight. Don't pop a seam. The voice came from the corner. It sounded like gravel grinding in a cement mixer. Jace turned his head, his neck stiff. Standing at the door was a mountain of a man. He had to be 6'6", with a beard that reached his chest and arms the size of tree trunks. He wore a black leather vest, a cut over a hoodie. Jace's vision cleared. He focused on the patches on the vest. The top rocker, Hell's Angels. The center patch, the Death Head. The winged skull wearing a helmet. The bottom rocker, New York. Jace's heart hammered against his ribs. The machine next to him sped up. Beep, 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 beep. The Hells Angels, the Big 81, the most notorious motorcycle club in the world. Oh God, Jace thought, panic rising like bile. I'm dead. I'm in the middle of a gang war. The guys who shot at us. And now these guys. Where am I? Jace croaked. His throat felt like sandpaper. I can't pay for this room. I don't have insurance. Please, I need to go. The giant at the door chuckled. It wasn't a mean sound, but it was terrifyingly deep. The name patch on his chest read Rusty. You ain't paying for a thing, son. You're a guest of the charter. Rusty stepped forward, his boots thudding on the floor. And nobody leaves until the boss says so. The boss? The door opened. 2 men in expensive suits, hospital administrators, scuttled in, looking pale and sweating profusely. Mr. Hammer, one of the suits stammered, addressing someone in the hallway. We've cleared the entire East Wing as requested. The police have been redirected, but we must insist that your men do not park on the helipad access road. A man walked into the room. The administrators parted like the Red Sea, pressing themselves against the wall to avoid touching him. He was older than Rusty, with streaks of steel gray in his beard and hair. He didn't look like a thug. He looked like a king in exile. He wore the same cut, but the patch on his chest read Vice President. This was Hammer. He ignored the administrators completely. He walked straight to Jace's bedside. His presence seemed to suck the oxygen out of the room. Get out, Hammer said to the suits, without turning his head. The administrators fled, closing the door softly behind them. Hammer pulled a metal chair closer to the bed. The legs scraped loudly against the floor. He sat down, leaning forward, resting his elbows on his knees. His eyes were dark, intelligent, and scanning Jace with an intensity that made Jace want to shrink into the sheets. Jace Miller, Hammer said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. Yes, sir, Jace whispered. 21 years old, engineering student, 3.8 GPA. You work 28 hours a week at Mick's Diner. You live in a rat hole apartment in Queens. You have $3,000 in tuition debt and you're behind on rent. Jace stared, his mouth dry. How do you know that? Because I make it my business to know the man who took a bullet for my daughter. Elena. The realization hit Jace like a physical blow. The quiet art student. The girl who drew cityscapes. She wasn't just a student. She was the daughter of the Hells Angels VP. Is she okay? Jace asked. It was the first thing that came to his mind. Hammer's expression softened. The tension in his massive shoulders dropped an inch. She's fine, not a scratch, because you covered her. You didn't run. You didn't hide. You dove in front of a Type 56 assault rifle. Hammer reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a thick manila envelope. He tossed it onto the bedside table. Tuition is paid, Hammer said flatly, for this year and the next, and your master's, if you decide to go for it. Jace looked at the envelope. It looked heavy. Your landlord, Mr. Grout? We've paid your lease for the year, and we gave him a little incentive to fix your heat. I heard it's been broken since October. I can't accept this, Jace said, his voice shaking. He tried to sit up, wincing. I didn't do it for money. I saw a girl in trouble. I didn't know who she was. Hammer stood up. He towered over the bed, blocking out the light from the window. I know you didn't do it for money, Hammer said, his voice dropping an octave, rumbling like a distant thunderstorm. If you were a mercenary, I'd pay you and send you on your way. But you're a civilian with heart. Hammer extended a hand. It was callous, scarred, and covered in ink. A hand that had held handlebars and hammers for 30 years. You don't refuse the angels, kid. You bled for my blood. That makes us kin, and the Hell's Angels always pay their debts, red and white or black and blue. Jace looked at the hand. He realized he wasn't just shaking hands with a man. He was making a pact with an army. He reached out and gripped Hammer's hand. The biker's grip was like iron, crushing but reassuring. Get some rest, Hammer said. When you heal, we ride. A week later, Jace was discharged. His left arm was in a sling, and his back throbbed with a dull ache, but he was walking. He stood in the hospital lobby, holding a plastic bag with his bloody clothes. The hospital staff gave him a wide berth, whispering as they walked by. He reached for his phone to check the bus schedule, still operating on the habit of poverty. The Q44 bus would take an hour and a half. Put that away, a voice said. Elena was standing by the sliding glass doors. She looked different. No sketchbook. She wore a fitted leather jacket, heavy engineer boots, and dark jeans. She looked like she belonged to the world he had only glimpsed. Elena, Jace said. Don't say thanks, she cut him off, but she smiled. It was a genuine smile this time, warm and relieved. You saved my life. I owe you everything. Come on. Your chariot awaits. The automatic doors slid open. The sound hit him first. A low, synchronized rumble that vibrated in his chest. Potato, potato, potato. The signature idol of Harley-Davidson's. Jace stepped onto the sidewalk and stopped dead. Lined up along the hospital pickup zone were 30 motorcycles. Chrome gleamed in the sunlight. The riders sat astride them, a sea of red and white patches. Tourists were taking photos from a distance, but nobody dared get close. Hammer was at the front, straddling a custom Road King with high-rise handlebars. He nodded at Jace. Shotgun in the truck, Hammer pointed to a black SUV behind the bikes. Or, if you've got the stones, you ride pillion with Rusty. Jace looked at the SUV. It was safe. It was quiet. It was the sensible choice for an engineering student. Then he looked at the bikes. He looked at the men who had locked down an entire hospital floor for him. He looked at the world that had tried to kill him, the chaotic, violent world, and the world that had saved him. I've never been on a bike, Jace said. First time for everything, Elena said. She hopped onto the back of her father's bike. She tossed Jace a helmet, matte black. Jace caught it. He walked over to Rusty's bike. The massive biker grilled him for a second, then nodded. Hold on tight, kid. We don't stop for red lights. As Jace climbed on, the engines roared to life. It wasn't noise. It was thunder. It was the sound of a landslide. The convoy moved out, blocking traffic. Jace saw police cars at the intersection. They didn't pull the bikers over. They blocked the cross traffic to let the angels pass. The wind whipped past Jace's helmet. The vibration of the engine traveled up his spine. For the first time in his life, Jace wasn't the invisible student walking in the rain, counting pennies. He was the center of the storm. He was riding the lightning. The convoy turned into Jace's neighborhood in Queens. It was a rundown area of cracked pavement and peeling paint, a place where hope went to die. The roar of 30 Harleys echoing off the narrow brick buildings brought people to their windows. They pulled up in front of Jace's apartment complex. Mr. Grout, the landlord, was standing on the stoop. He was a short, bitter man who delighted in threatening eviction whenever Jace was a day late. He held a clipboard, looking ready to paste an eviction notice on the door. "What is this racket?" Grout shouted, marching down the steps. "I'll call the cops! You can't park those junk heaps here!" He stopped when he saw Jace climb off the back of a bike. "Miller?" Grout sneered, ignoring the bikers for a moment. "Where have you been? I was about to throw your crap on the street. You're late on—" Hammer killed his engine. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the silence of a predator spotting prey. Slowly, deliberately, Hammer kicked his kickstand down. He dismounted. Then Rusty dismounted. Then 10 others. They didn't say a word. They just walked onto the sidewalk and formed a loose semicircle around Mr. Grout. Grout's face went from red to pale white in 3 seconds. He looked at the patches. "Hell's Angels." "Mr. Grout," Hammer said. His voice was polite, which made it infinitely scarier. "I believe there's a misunderstanding. Mr. Miller's rent is paid for the year. Check your account." Grout stammered. I haven't checked since." "And," Hammer continued, stepping into Grout's personal space, "I heard the heating in Unit 4B is broken. Winter is coming. It would be a shame if our friend Jace got cold." Rusty cracked his knuckles. It sounded like a pistol shot. "I'll fix it," Grout squeaked, clutching his clipboard like a shield. "Today, right now, I'll replace the whole unit." "My boys are going to help you," Hammer said, patting Grout on the shoulder hard enough to make the man's knees buckle. "They're going to inspect the plumbing, the electric, everything, just to make sure Jace is comfortable, because Jace is family now. You treat him like you'd treat me. Understand?" "Yes. Yes, sir." Jace watched, stunned. The man who had terrorized him for 2 years was shaking like a leaf. Elena walked up to Jace. "Go upstairs, get changed. We're not done." "Not done?" Jace asked, looking at the surreal scene of bikers carrying tools into his building. "The financial debt is paid," she said darkly, her eyes flashing. "But the blood debt isn't settled." They didn't leave him at the apartment. They took him to the clubhouse, known simply as the church. It was a converted warehouse in the industrial district. High fences, barbed wire, cameras, reinforced steel doors. It looked like a fortress. Inside, however, it was a sanctuary. A long mahogany bar ran along one wall. Pool tables sat in the center. The walls were lined with memorabilia, old photos from the 60s, parts of bikes, and framed news articles. But the mood wasn't festive. It was focused. Hammer led Jace into a back room, the war room. On the wall was a large map of the city. Photos of men were pinned to it. "The Iron Vipers," Hammer said, pointing to a photo of a man with a snake tattoo on his face. "A pop-up club. Drug runners. No honor. They thought they could send a message by shooting at my daughter." Jace felt a chill. "What are you going to do?" "We are the Hell's Angels, Jace," Hammer said, pouring 2 glasses of whiskey. He slid one to Jace. "We don't call the police. We handle our own affairs." He turned to Jace. "You don't have to watch, but I want you to know something. The world is full of wolves. You've been a sheep your whole life, trying to graze peacefully. But you have wolf blood in you, kid. I saw it when you jumped that counter." "I'm not a killer," Jace said softly, looking at the amber liquid in his glass. "No," Hammer agreed. "You're a protector, and protectors need to see that justice exists. You need to see the monster die so you can sleep at night." A prospect, a young recruit, burst into the room. "Hammer, we found them. Intelligence says they're at the wrecking yard in Hunts Point. They're loading up a van to skip town." Hammer's eyes went cold. He downed his whiskey in one gulp. "Mount up, full colors." The rain had started again, slashing sideways. The convoy didn't roar this time. They parked a mile out and moved in on foot. The wrecking yard was a dystopian maze of rusted metal skeletons and crushed sedans. Under the glare of a single, buzzing floodlight, 5 men wearing the Iron Vipers patch were hurriedly throwing crates into a van. They looked nervous, constantly checking the shadows. Jace stood in the shadows with Elena and Rusty. He felt the cold rain on his face, mixing with the sweat of fear. "Stay here," Elena whispered. She took his good hand. "Just watch." Hammer walked out into the light, alone. He held nothing but a heavy length of chain. Leaving so soon? Hammer's voice boomed over the sound of the rain. The vipers spun around, reaching for their waistbands. Don't, Hammer warned. From the darkness surrounding the yard, 20 angels stepped out. They held chains, bats, and heavy wrenches. This wasn't a gunfight. This was an extermination. The Viper leader, the man with the face tattoo, froze. He looked at the odds. 5 against 20. He knew the math. Hammer, the Viper leader stammered, raising his hands. It was just business. We didn't know the girl was yours until after. You shot into a diner full of civilians, Hammer growled, walking forward. The gravel crunched under his boots. You shot a kid who had nothing to do with this life. The Viper leader tried to run, but Rusty was there, blocking the path. Hammer grabbed the Viper leader by the throat and dragged him across the wet gravel like a rag doll. He threw him at Jace's feet. The man looked up, terrified, mud smearing his face. He looked at Jace, seeing the sling on his arm. This is the boy, Hammer said, his voice low and dangerous. He's 21. He serves coffee. And he has more courage in his little finger than you have in your entire charter. Hammer looked at Jace. You want to say anything to him before he goes away? Jace looked down at the man who had pulled the trigger, the man who had almost killed Elena. He felt the anger, hot and sharp, but he pushed it down. He wasn't like them. He was better. You missed, Jace said coldly. Hammer laughed. It was a dark, satisfied sound that echoed in the yard. Get them out of here. Strip their patches. Burn the bikes. The angels moved in. It was swift and brutal. The Vipers were dismantled, their cuts ripped from their backs, their motorcycles doused in gasoline. As Jace walked back to the SUV with Elena, a fireball erupted behind them, lighting up the night sky in orange and black. The Vipers were gone. The debt was settled. 2 weeks later. The clubhouse was a different place. The tension was gone, replaced by the smell of barbecue and the sound of laughter. Jace sat on a bar stool, his sling finally off. He was laughing at a story Rusty was telling about a run to Sturgis. He felt at ease. The constant, gnawing anxiety of debt was gone. He had finished his finals. He had a future. The music cut out. Hammer walked onto the small stage at the front of the room. The room went silent instantly. Every eye turned to the VP. Listen up, Hammer bellowed. Tonight, we celebrate. The Vipers are history. The streets are clean. He paused, scanning the crowd until his eyes landed on Jace. But we also have to settle a final debt. Get up here, Miller. Jace stood up, his legs feeling a little shaky. He walked to the stage. The room was watching him. This kid, Hammer said, putting a heavy hand on Jace's neck. He isn't a biker. He doesn't know a piston from a spark plug, but he has the code. He put himself between the innocent and the fire. Hammer turned to a prospect who was holding a folded piece of leather. You aren't a member, Jace. You have to earn the death head, and that takes years of prospecting. It's blood, sweat, and time. Hammer took the leather item. It was a vest. But you are family, and family needs to be recognized. He unfolded the vest. It wasn't a full cut, but on the front left breast, there was a patch. Support, 81, worldwide. And below it, a small silver pin that simply read, Protected. You wear this, Hammer said, his voice echoing in the silent hall. And every angel from here to California, from Berlin to Tokyo, knows you are under our shield. You have trouble, you call. You need help, we ride. Hammer draped the vest over Jace's shoulders. It was heavy. It felt like armor. It felt like belonging. Welcome to the family, son, Hammer whispered. The room erupted. Uffa! Angels forever! Forever angels! Men who looked like they ate concrete for breakfast were cheering, raising their beers. Jace looked at Elena. She was beaming at him, raising her bottle in a toast. Jace slipped his arms into the vest. It fit perfectly. 6 months later. The sun was setting over the Hudson River, casting the city in gold and violet light. Jace walked out of the university exam hall. He tossed his backpack over one shoulder. The semester was over. His grades were perfect. The crushing weight of financial ruin was a distant memory. He walked to the student parking lot. He walked past the bus stop without glancing at it. Parked in a dedicated motorcycle slot was a Harley-Davidson Sportster Iron 883. It was matte black with red trim. It wasn't the biggest bike on the road, but it was sleek, fast, and mean. Hammer had helped him pick it out. Rusty had tuned the engine. Elena had taught him how to ride it. He swung a leg over the seat, tapping the starter. The engine roared to life, a hungry, aggressive growl. "Hey, stranger." Elena walked up from behind a pillar, holding 2 helmets. She looked happy. The guarded look she used to wear in the diner was gone. She was free. "Ready to ride?" Jace asked, strapping on his helmet. "Always," she said, climbing onto her own bike next to him. "Dad says the charter is doing a run to the coast. He wants us up front." Jace revved the engine. He caught his reflection in the side mirror. He didn't see the tired, broke boy who counted pennies for rent anymore. He saw a man who had walked through fire and come out the other side. "Let's go," Jace said. They kicked their bikes into gear and merged onto the highway, 2 streaks of chrome and freedom, riding into the sunset, protected by a halo made of iron.